This is the OJ Today. Welcome, everybody. I'm Alex Bastivansky, and we are doing something a little bit different today since it is the holidays and games took a hiatus for a little bit. We are going to be chatting and doing an OJHL sort of a mid-season review, even though we're 4 months in, we've only got 2 months left in the season, but it's sort of a review to what's going on so far, and I'm pleased to be joined by play-by-play extraordinaire man, Jamie Neugebauer. Jamie, welcome to the show, buddy.
Great to be on again. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to have Alex Bloomfield on the second half of the show, but the first half is going to be a review of the Southwest. We got to get right to it, buddy. Let's get to the Southwest, and let's start off in the West Division with the Georgetown Raiders, a team that's already had a 19-game win streak earlier this year. Georgetown's been out of this world. Greg Walters' team firing on all cylinders. Take it away. Your impressions of Georgetown so far?
I love the way they play. They're a pack of gorillas. I was talking to Georgetown forward Johnny Hampton after their game against Oakville, and he's like, you know what, the way we play is a little tough in that big rink there in Oakville, but they play so hard, all 200 feet of the ice. They're solid from top to bottom. Gotta love what I see from Georgetown so far.
Fantastic. Burlington, another team, the Cougars, that have really impressed. Mark Juris, of course, the reigning OJHL Coach of the Year. The Cougars already with, I believe it was a 13-game unbeaten streak this year that was just snapped a couple of weeks ago by the Patriots, but the Cougs looking really good so far, aren't they?
Yeah, no, a lot of turnover for Mark Juris, and he's done a great job once again with that team. Their power play is so good. They brought in Matt Watson from Coburg, and they brought back Chris Cobham, their captain from last year. They play a heavy game down low. You know, for the hockey purists, they play below the goal line. They're a hard, heavy team, and again, a lot of fun to watch.
I like Mark Juris' comment when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, saying Coburg must have the best defense in the league if they'd let Matt Watson go, because he has been lights out for them so far. And 3 players, of course, also on the NHL watch list, which was very impressive. Let's move on to Buffalo. Dipped a bit this year since snagging the 4th seed in the Southwest last season, but they've got some big wins to their credit so far this year. Over powers like Wellington and Oakville, which you've seen firsthand, of course, being the Oakville Blades play-by-play guy. They've got the power to surprise this team, don't they?
Yeah, no, they've had a lot of suspensions and injury problems with that team. Again, lots of turnover. Again, all that exposure in Buffalo to all sorts of different opportunities for those kids. Hard for them to keep teams together. But, you know, they have talent. They lost a lot of guys, but they brought guys in. Cameron Radzuan has been really good for them. Christian DeFelice, a Canadian kid playing for Buffalo, has been really good for them. And they got a team that can beat you, no doubt.
Orangeville, turning a few heads, and 2 big wins as well over some very established, powerful OJ teams a couple of weeks ago. Orangeville, they chasing the Junior Canadians for the last playoff spot in the Southwest, and you get the feeling that's going to be the way it goes for the rest of the season, neck and neck, those 2 teams.
Yeah, no, Orangeville's got some great goaltending. I was joking with their head coach, Justin Teakle, yesterday, actually. Orangeville against teams that I work for, I don't know, they always seem to find a way to beat teams that I work for. But, you know, they have got a veteran top line there with Zach Lyons and Rigney there, and you know, they got a pretty solid decor, but it's all about goaltending. Ruan Badenhorst, Nathan Torchia, 2 guys with great futures. And Orangeville is a tricky team on their day, no doubt.
Yeah, they are. And talk about Badenhorst for a second, because he's a guy who does have OHL experience, doesn't he? And you can really see it when he's between the pipes in the OJ.
Yeah, no, down low, he's super quick. I know he played a game against Oakville earlier this year, 58 saves in a win for Orangeville. He is tough down low. You got to go high on him, but he is very athletic.
Right. Okay, so we have to chat about Milton. Now, the Ice Sox started off relatively well this year, and I say relative compared to last year, of course, where in the second half of the season, the way they finished off was just, it was unfortunate, it was brutal. There was a bit of a fire sale there where they gave some of the older guys a chance to go and play with more established teams and make a deep run into the playoffs. The unfortunate result of that was Milton losing a lot and losing pretty badly. This year they actually started off relatively well, as I mentioned, with 3 wins in their first 9 games, including a big win over St. Mike's. But things haven't gone quite as well over the last little while. Their last win, looking at my notes here, going all the way back to September 30th. So the wheels at this point have kind of fallen off, and hopefully they're going to get back on.
Yeah, no, they definitely had an MO of, at least if they were going to struggle, at least we'll be young and we'll struggle. And that is something that I think is admirable. They have a guy that I liked a lot last year in Thomas Maya out of the Mississauga Rebels minor midgets. They've got Derek McVeigh, who's an OHL draft pick. You know, they're a team that is actually looking to build for the future. And so, you know, I'll give them props for that. It has been another tough year for them, and they've sold off some pieces. But what more can you say about them, right?
All right, and Chris Van Stone, GM, a really good hockey mind. So hopefully better things to come for Milton over the last couple of months. Newsy, stick around. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with more of our review of the Southwest. More RJ Today coming up in just a moment. Welcome back to the OJ Today as we continue on with our mid-season review here, looking at the Southwest Conference. First of all, continue to be joined by Jamie Neugebauer on Skype. And Jamie, let's get into that South Division now. It's been a dogfight. Two teams have really separated themselves from the pack, and that would be Oakville and St. Mike so far.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's been very interesting to watch, and when they play each other, it's so tight. One thing that could be argued, and I know St. Mike's, is a good team. They have had, a slightly easier strength of schedule, to start this season, and they're going to have a tougher one coming up here. They got some brutal games to end 2016, but it's been a very interesting dogfight between those two.
Well, let's start off with the Blades, a team you know very well, being one of the four teams you do play-by-play for. You're the busiest guy in the OJHL, as I like to say. But let's start with the Blades. Currently just a slim lead over the Buzzers for first place, but your impression from what you've seen from the boys from 16 Mile Creek so far this year?
Well, they're a team with a lot of talent, a team with a lot of veterans. It's true. On their day when they're not, on their best, they certainly are a team that have had some tough losses. And then, we see a couple days ago they beat Georgetown in very dramatic fashion. So, they're a team with all the talent in the world. They have got a forward core that's 9-10 guys, serious guys deep, and Brendan McGlynn, again, the key in that. I always talk about goaltending, but McGlynn has been tremendous for Oakville, and that's huge for them.
And Bryce Misley, of course, on the radar of NHL scouts, projected to go in next year's NHL draft, selected to Canada East this year for the World Junior A Challenge. Misley, very impressive.
Oh, he's been incredible. He's been everything. The thing that's really not talked about, his skill, his speed, all that stuff is top notch. He is an unbelievable face-off man. You talk to Oakville assistant coach Mark Edwards, who's the big stats guy. Bryce is just shredding the league in the face-off dot, and that's a huge add. Obviously, they already had Drew Warat, who was an unbelievable face-off guy too. So Mike Tarantino's got a lot of choices when it's a big face-off.
Right. St. Mike's hot on Oakville's heels right now in second place, and that, of course, could change by next weekend. But St. Mike's, a squad that always plays Oakville very, very tough as well. Talk about the Buzzers.
Yeah, obviously they play on that small ice surface, so it's always very interesting to see when they come to 16 Mile, and it's interesting to see when Oakville goes to St. Mike's. But they have a lot of weapons up front. Obviously, we saw Finn Evans at the World Junior A Challenge, and his draft stock for the National Hockey League gone way up. Jason Clark, the head coach of Team Canada East, was thrilled with Finn Evans' performance there. They obviously have Mark Paulini, who's as dangerous as any defenseman in this league, offensively creating on the back end there. And in net, again, back to goaltending, Cosimo Lazzarino has been sensational this year, as good as anybody in the league, in my opinion. Big fan of his. And the rest of the team, very, very solid. Obviously, Cameron Wright's lighting it up. He's got all sorts of talent. Cameron Searles, AJ Durazio, they're a team that can score. They're a team that can play with a lot of grit. They got a lot of pieces, and they're well built.
Let's move on to the Toronto Patriots, a squad that really has upped their game recently with the absence of head coach Mario Ciccillo due to unfortunate family circumstances right now, medical leave, and we wish Mario all the best to get back as soon as possible, of course. But they've really upped their game, some big upsets recently. The Patriots showing well.
Yeah, and it's a team that really is built out from the back end out. And one of the problems with the Patriots has that they've had is health on the back end. And when they are healthy, as we saw in North York, they had Nick Kalpouzis, they had Ryan Wells, they had Graham McLean, they even had Lee Lapie, the forward, playing D, and he did a tremendous job. They had Josh Sherratt back in the lineup. They're finally getting healthy on that back end. Cam Gray has really stepped up. I'm a big fan of Tyler Fassel behind Cam Gray too. But Cam has really, really stepped up as a premier goaltender in this league. And up front, they have enough offense. They're not going to score a ton of goals. They have enough offense with their back end being as solid as it is.
Right, Cam Gray, the Texan with the Canadian tattoo, apparently, which we've got to find out more about. But the guys on the Patriots love to rib him about that, but he's been a standout for them. The Rangers, another team you do play-by-play for, so you know them well. Tough to get a handle on these guys so far this year. They've been a bit inconsistent, and they unloaded who quite possibly was their best player, aside from Campoli, of course, and Blasby to Georgetown. Your impressions of North York?
Yeah, I think they've made some great trades, and obviously you mentioned unloading Keegan Blasby, who has a lot of skill. Big fan of his, but they've brought in some guys who are very hard workers, guys who play 200 feet, like Ethan Wiseman, Tuur Linden, Ross Krieger, those types of guys who are maybe a little bit like a smidge lower on the skill scale, but higher on the compete level, you could say. And Jeremy Liner, again, back to goaltending. He's been sensational. A lot of good goalies in this division. And on their day, as you mentioned, it's hard to get a handle. On their day, they can beat anybody. They beat Whitby. They beat Oakville. But hard to get a handle. It's about finding consistency on a game-to-game basis for that squad.
And a team that's building towards the future a little bit. So it's I think we can expect better things from them next year. The Junior Canadians, a force last season. This year they'll be battling Orangeville, like we mentioned, for the 8th and final playoff spot. But Junior Canadians, I would say a rebuilding year for Toronto as well this year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Jeff Angelides coming in, it was Mario Chiquilo's baby for so long, and Jeff Angelides and company have had to come in. Blake Ricci taking the helm there. They've had to come in and really sort of build this from the ground up. They've brought a lot of young midget players in straight in their first year. There are a lot of rookies. Sal Felice had a big job as the captain of that team. And they've had good goaltending, but I mean, with young players, you're going to struggle with consistency. Maybe they're a little lighter on the talent side and looking higher for the character side. It's hard to balance that on an occasion, but on their day, again, they can beat somebody with their work ethic. It's been tough for them lately, though.
We got about 40 seconds, Newsy, so a quick comment, but we have to mention, Mississauga last place in the division, but I like this team. They bring it every single game. Joe Washcrack always has a very hardworking team, and this year's no exception.
Yeah, losing Julian Syme to the Ontario Hockey League has been tough for them, but they just had a very good weekend. Chris Carabassis and Beaulieu there on the front end there, the forward core. They do have guys that can score. They do have dangerous guys. Without Syme, it's been tough for them. Luca Durante, the young kid that has, a big load to carry all of a sudden now, and that back end, again, a big load to carry. But, we'll see. Kyler Matthews has stepped up on that back end, so they're a tough team on their day for sure.
Better from them, hopefully, in the new year. And speaking of which, happy holidays, buddy, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
Okay, more OJ today coming up in just a moment. Welcome back to the OJ Today. We switch from the southwest now to the northeast in our review of the year so far, and I am happy to be joined via Skype by Alex Bloomfield, the play-by-play man for the Pickering Panthers. Alex, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, so the northeast, let's start things off with the east. It bears repeating, the ridiculously difficult east. We talked to Brent Tully before last week. He was talking about how he thinks it's probably the most difficult division in all of Canadian Junior A hockey. I don't disagree with that. It's been incredible so far. Let's start off with Trenton. This year's host at the Dudley Hewitt Cup. Last year's Buckland Cup champions, and once again they're leading the way in the east.
Yeah, I mean, the Trenton Golden Hawks, I was kind of negative on them last time I was on with you, actually, and they've kind of responded since then, and they've turned it around after a brief funk in the early November months there, and that was partially due to although their players being gone to the various challenges around the Eastern Ontario, but otherwise this Trenton team has been unstoppable. Their offense, their top three lines could be first lines in almost any other team in this league. And I saw them this past weekend in Pickering. And yeah, there's not very many holes on this team. Their goaltending, they've got a minor problem right now. I mean, their backup goaltender, or for lack of a better word, Joseph Murdoch, he's up with the Erie Otters right now, and he may stay there. So they really only have Chris Jansen. He had no backup in Pickering on Sunday night. So they're going to have to figure that out, but that's a really minor problem. And Jansen's been so good all year long, that should be no problem.
Yeah, excellent. We saw the potential moving on to Whitby here, who's in second place. We saw the potential last year, and this season it's really coming to fruition, isn't it? This team has been just a joy to watch so far, and putting the puck in the net, not difficult. Currently third overall in the league in scoring.
Yeah, Tiger McDonald helped out when they picked him up about a month ago, so that was the big pickup for them there. But they've since then been rolling along. I mean, people have been kind of down on them. They've been looking at Coburg and Trenton. Are these two going to walk away with the East? But Whitby's been keeping right with Coburg, and they may end up second in this division by the end of it. Interesting thing for them is they picked up John Hudgen, who was released by Markham in the past week. Another veteran guy, another veteran, top 6 scorer from a lot of people's opinion. So that's an interesting addition as well. So the Whitby Fury, again, a team that I think definitely in the conversation to come out of the East, up there with the Trentons and Coburgs.
Right, and a big 6-0 win over Georgetown earlier in the season too, which opened a lot of eyes. Let's move on to Coburg. Obviously a massive year for the Cougars, hosting the Royal Bank Cup in May. And they haven't just sat back this year as well, even though they're going to be in the RBC regardless as the host. They've really brought it this year. They're chasing Trenton. That might be a bit tough for anyone to catch Trenton, but Coburg definitely looking good this year as well.
I think they've got a little bit more roster leeway down there in Coburg right now. They've been a little slower with their moves. Trenton made a lot of their moves early in the season. We saw it at the December 1st roster deadline with Coburg. They added a few guys from out west. And that's actually been paying off. And one of their pickups from Saskatchewan, I think he has 5 points in 2 games, his first 2 games here in December with Coburg. So he's been a big addition for them. And they have a few more moves to make in January as well. I think Trenton may be closer to being done on that front. So Coburg, they're lurking around, and they got their eyes in the Buckland Cup. They're not going to just wait till they get that chance in the RBC.
Right. Kingston and Wellington, the two teams battling it out to stay out of the basement in the East. And of course, there's no shame in that, considering they're both well over 500 as well. But let's start with Kingston first. Taurine White has his team playing very well so far this year.
Yeah, they were fading away to the back at the beginning there in October, but they put on a run since then, and they've gotten up, and they've actually technically passed Wellington in the standings briefly anyway. And the Wellington Dukes, yeah, it's been a tough stretch for them as well. But those the Kingston Voyageurs, there's a whole group there up front that is veteran guys, and then there's a few younger players that are also stepping up for them. They got of all these teams in the East next year, the Kingston Voyageurs are set up the best, I think, to compete again and be at the top of that division. A lot of these guys are going with the older veterans going for this year. Kingston is hanging around this season, but they got their eyes set on next season as far as coming out of this division.
I think one thing we've learned, though, and you mentioned this last time you were on the show, is that Kingston, you can never count them out. They've been pretty much the most consistent team over the last few years in terms of making it to the conference final, if not the final, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been on a stretch. I forget the number now, but they've been in the conference final, I think, since 09-10. It's pretty impressive. And so, yeah, Kingston is a team that can pull off that upset, and like we said, they're probably going to face a North Division opponent, either Stouffville or Markham, in that first round. That could easily be a series they could win. They're matched up with those teams, I think, quite evenly, and you never know once things get rolling in the playoffs.
Okay, the Wellington Dukes now, and last time I had you on, you had Wellington as one of your dark horses to do some damage this year. Yeah. As mentioned, now they're battling it out with Kingston to stay out of 5th place in the East. But they're going to face a team for the North possibly as well in the first round. Is Wellington still one of your dark horses? Are you still as high on them as you were before?
I'm going to stick with them for now. I have been. It has been tough to watch them for the past 2 or 3 weeks ago. They went on a bit of a slide. They lost, I think, 8 of 11. But since then, they've recovered. They've won about 4 of the last 5, I believe. And the Dukes, they're a team, again, led by their goaltender, Connor Rickman, who I'm still very high on. The guy's been overworked a little bit. He's been out for 3 games now this season. He only has that help from his backup so far. The Wellington Dukes, again, they're last in this division, but I think in any other division are in the top 2, if not first. And Georgetown maybe being the exception there, but that's I got to stick with them. The Wellington Dukes, they're just like Kingston. They
Alex
can
is calling it. All right, Alex is calling. I love it. We've got, listen, about 30 seconds. Just to go back to Trenton to 1 second, do you like comparing this year to last year? Is it a stronger team this year in Trenton, or did you like last year's team a bit better?
That's a tough question. I think they're going to end up with a worse record than last year. They are not going to run the table. I think they're one loss away from last year's record. But I think this is a better team. I think they're going to lose a few more games in the regular season, but I think they're more set for a run through the playoffs.
And of course, they got the path right into the Dudley Hewitt Cup as well.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, man. We're going to come back in a moment. We're going to talk about the North Division and where your Panthers are. Okay, more OJ today coming up in just a moment. Welcome back to the OJ Today. We continue on with our review of the Northeast Conference with Pickering Panthers play-by-play guru Alex Bloomfield. Alex, moving on now to the North Division. We're going to get to Pickering in just a moment, but we'll start off. It's been a battle between Markham and Stouffville all season for top spot there. Let's start with Markham so far. Aside from a big upset to Lindsay a couple weekends ago, how do you feel Michael Laddie's squad's been playing so far?
Yeah, the Markham Royals have been better since about mid-November. They've been starting to string some wins together. They got a little clearance away from Stouffville. Those two were changing leads every other weekend, it seemed, for a couple months there, but now they have about a 6-point lead. It seems like they're going to come out of that North Division, but they have an interesting, they didn't do much at the December 1st deadline. They actually traded away a couple guys, and there was actually a whole interesting thing with them in Stouffville where they traded a 1-for-1 swap between Connor Ryder and Justin Bennett between those top two teams in the North Division. So that one's a little bit curious. Again, I think both these teams have the ability to add at the January deadline, and that's where this race is going to come down to it, I think. But right now, I'd give it to Markham, and they're playing well enough to win this division.
Well, I was going to say the Spirit, of course, fighting for that top spot, but from week to week, I find with the Spirit, we haven't known what to expect. They might play really well one night and then the next night get blown out by an Eastern Power like to Trenton just recently. Of course, there's no shame really in losing to Trenton. But, the Spirit overall, though, have had a good season so far, haven't they?
They have, and Davis Cuxis helps them out as well. Everyone's just picking away from the Pickering Panthers there as he was given to them at that roster deadline. So I think this team is built to be a component that can knock off a lower seeded team in the East. Like we said, it's going to be real interesting how these matchups work out. With Markham, likely they'll be if they win the division, they'll be the 2 seed, but they'll play a 7 seed, which would be 5th in that division, and then this Stouffville team will be in and around the 4 or 5. So you might get a Coburg, you might end up getting one of the lower teams depending on where you finish. So it's really hard to shake down. I don't think either of them are going to knock off a Trenton. Coburg and Whitby would be tough for either of those teams, but it's those bottom two, whoever gets Wellington, Kingston, that they could both defeat in that first round, right, and maybe take that momentum into the second.
Newmarket, the Canes will be battling Lindsay for that 8th and final playoff spot. That's a guarantee pretty much, for the rest of the year. Who's going to grab the 8th spot? They played a couple of weeks ago, and Newmarket absolutely spanked them 7-3. I like the makeup of this Newmarket team, though. Todd Winders, their leading scorer and team captain, has been fabulous so far this year. Just talk about the Canes.
Yeah, the Newmarket Hurricanes, again, I'm watching this race closely because, partly because it has to do with Pickering a little bit. We're always looking from the back, but those two teams, I'm wondering if they don't sell at the deadline, some of their top guys. Even though there's a playoff spot on the line, do you really want that 8th playoff spot to go against Trenton? So I think if one of those teams may just bow out of that race, maybe both of them sort of take down their veteran guys, their 96s and some of their 97s. I don't know. It's really tough to tell. I'm trying to see who's going to really go for that 8th spot. I think there's a different mentality. Depends on what the coaches think. Do they want that 8th spot? Do they want that playoff experience to go for one round and probably 4 games?
And then get slaughtered by whoever finishes first in the East. No, I understand. So talking about Lindsay then, because it's funny, I filmed their game against Markham last weekend, and a couple of very knowledgeable OJHL people who attend quite a few games said you never know what you're getting with this team. One night they could be absolutely horrible. The next day they could be lights out fantastic, as they were knocking off first place Markham in that game. So Lindsay, definitely a team with the power to surprise if they keep that team together.
Yeah, and I think they're more likely to keep their team together than Newmarket. Newmarket, more of a traditional team that would be more likely, I think, to trade away some of those veterans at the deadline. Lindsay doesn't usually do a whole lot transaction-wise during the season. They usually stick with their guys. Cam Lamport, I think if they hold him out, he's obviously a number one line scorer on any team, and he's if this Lindsay team stays together and Newmarket folds a little bit, I think they got a shot at making this last playoff spot. And it's funny, they're kind of a little bit removed from that North Division, a little bit farther out. It's not that far, but it seems like they're on their own little island out there, and they might it might be enough to sneak them into the playoffs if they hold together.
Less than 2 minutes left, and Brock Trail, by the way. Dynamite player. What a great shot on that guy. Team you know very well, obviously Pickering. Let's cover them. And I was going to say, from the beginning of the season to what I now see, they, to me, are one of the most improved teams in the league. You mentioned how young they were last time. They are young, but this is a team that's beginning to mature. Talk about Pickering.
Yeah, and I've talked to the staff from top to bottom, pretty much the coaching staff right through to the ownership, and they're all looking forward to next year. It's all eyes on next year right now, and they've got a whole crew of guys that they're wanting to hold on to. They're not going to trade them all away at the deadline this year. In fact, at the deadline they might be pretty quiet. They made most of their moves on December 1st. Maybe one more guy will go. They only have 196 left on the roster, no 97s. So it's an interesting, well, except for the goaltenders, which they definitely want to hang on to for next year. And this Pickering team, yeah, they're a team that will, I think, can pull off some upsets down the regular season stretch because they're well coached. They got some good systems going. They tied North York a couple weekends ago. They came very close to beating Cobourg and Whitby in regular season games within the last month. Right. There's a young group of players here that are going to make noise next year, and if teams are complacent against them, especially in Pickering, it could be trouble.
We got to really quickly go to Aurora now, battling to stay out of the basement with Pickering all season. Flashes of brilliance at times from this team's of brilliance, but it is a rebuilding year in Aurora, isn't it?
It is for sure, and they'll always have that. They beat the Trenton Golden Hawks 3-0.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Season long, and right now only 3 other teams can say they've beaten Trenton this season. If Trenton goes on to win the whole thing, then hey, they can hold that over their heads. But the Aurora teams, much like Pickering, they're looking to next year, and it'll be fun to watch them sort of fight for that last 10th spot in the.
And I like tuning in just to hear Joe Montezano's play-by-play. So it's fantastic. Yeah. Alex, happy holidays. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Talk to you again.
And to all of you, just wanted to wish you a happy holiday season. Thank you for watching. And just remember, to keep up to date on everything with the league, you can head to ojhl.ca. On Twitter, you can find it at OJHLofficial, and on Facebook at facebook.com/OJHLofficial. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks, and we'll see you next week.